overlooking downtown Phoenix. From the Faith Talk Studios in the Camelback Towers, it's the Dustin Daniels Show, where God, sex, and current events are explored from a Christian perspective. Here's your host, Dustin Daniels.
What exactly is the key to becoming a man of integrity, a man of honor, a man of valor? What is the key to becoming a strong and irresistible husband? Well, last week we spoke with Ken Nair, author of the book titled Discovering the Mind of a Woman. And you heard my story about how this book has literally changed my view as a husband. And last week we opened the discussion about the 4 male prejudices about women. You know, those things that most of us may never actually say, but are certainly buried in our subconscious. And they actually flow out toward our wives and our attitudes. Well, I had so much fun talking to Ken last week, I invited him back, and we're going to talk more about his book, once again titled Discovering the Mind of a Woman. And today we're going to discuss the 6 desirable qualities in a man. Ken, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me back.
Hey, this is a lot of fun. I tell you, you have really opened my mind on some of the things that I wasn't even aware that I was doing, and my attitudes and my tone towards my wife, Amy. And one of the sections in your book is this idea there are 6 desirable qualities in every single man. And the first one is, how do we as men, how do we walk in and out of the house without causing damage? And I thought, wow, what kind of question is that? So you pose another question. What do I typically say and do when I walk into the house after a hard day at work?
Yeah, nothing. No. It's like the situation, a guy he's come home from work. He's been at work all day. His wife says to him, "How'd your day go?" He says, "It was a day."
Right.
She says, "Well, did anything happen?" "No, I just was at work. Why are you doing this?" And she's like, "Oh, okay." So she backs off because he doesn't want to talk to her. And I'm reflecting on the idea that Jesus said, "I used to call you servants, but I'm not going to call you servants anymore. I'm going to call you friends." And then he qualifies it. Conversation. I'm going to keep you informed about everything that's going on between the Father and I. So he's taking his focus and her focus to God, and then he's going to tell her. He's going to talk to her about it. She says that she realizes it's not going to do any good to talk to him. So she quits. But the phone rings, and a friend from work is calling him because he was sick at home that day and didn't get to work. So he calls him up, and he says, "How's things going at work? What's going on at work?" Well, this guy talks for a half hour with his friend about details at work.
Oh, my.
And so he gets off the phone, and his wife says to him, "I think you love your friend more than you love me." And his real clever comeback is, "Well, I married you. I didn't marry my friend." And he thinks he solved the problem. He has, in fact, increased the problem because in both instances, he's wounded her spirit. And so does he know that? No, he thinks she's just trying to drive him crazy with all these questions and keeping on his back. And no matter what he does, it ain't right. No matter how hard he tries, it's not good enough. And so he's quit. And you can't be like Christ and quit like that.
You know, what I've noticed, Ken, is over the 11 years that I've been married to Amy, I come to the realization, like, for me to actually communicate well with her, and what you say in your book is for my spirit to communicate to her spirit, right?
Yes. Uh-huh.
It's she, even though I may have had a good day or a bad day, regardless, there's something in me that doesn't want to tell her about my day because I just lived through it, and I get home and I don't want to live through it again by telling every single detail. Does that make sense?
Yep. I'm home to relax. I'm not there as a ministry to my wife and family. Who am I supposed to portray Christ to? I'm there to relax. And so it's like a guy, when you're going to talk spirit to spirit, okay? It's like a guy in class, and he's sharing his heart about how he demolished a mixer, a household mixer, because he was so angry at it. And his wife saw him demolish that thing, and it scared her half to death. That kind of temper scared her. So as he's sharing this, he's weeping. He can hardly talk. And so after he finishes sharing it, I go around the class. There's about 20 people in the class, men and women. And I ask each of them, when you heard him talk, how did that affect you? And they're talking about, it touched me. Wives are saying it drew my heart dearer to him because of that honesty and humility and vulnerability. And so the guys are saying, wow, it really affected me. I could live that with him. And I've said to them, when it was all done, do you realize you all had a spirit-to-spirit occasion with him? Mm. And that's practice. Now that you know what it feels like, your wife wants the same thing from you. For you to let her in your heart without causing damage. And for you to let her invite you into her heart because you're safe. And we don't even know what that means. So God gives us practice with occasions like that so we can understand that's what it feels like. Why? Practice for spirit to spirit with God. That's what he wants with us. That's what he had with Adam. He wants it back.
You know, that word safe that you just used. I'm under the impression that we as men, we either think our marriages we generally think that our marriages are better than what they really are. Mm-hmm. And that our homes, even though we think they may be safe, are they really? Mm. Does that make sense to you at all?
Yes. Yeah. And the idea is that I have to determine what safe is from her perspective, not mine.
Yeah.
Because if you ask me, I'm wonderful. and if you
Mr. Wonderful, that's right.
My wife and a lot of guys think their wife is blessed by being married to them. And that's because we operate on the physical, mechanical, mental plane only. We don't even know there's a spiritual plane. I didn't know there's a spiritual plane, a realm. And she lived there. And so we never communicated spirit to spirit with each other. And like I mentioned last week, I want every encounter that Nancy has with me for her to feel like she's had an encounter with Christ. That's my goal. Mm.
My guest today is Ken Nair. We are talking about his book, Discovering the Mind of a Woman. To learn more about Ken and his ministry, you can visit ChristQuestMinistries.com. And today we are talking about the desirable qualities in a man. Number one was walking in and out of the house without causing damage. And if you're not sure if you're doing that, right, Ken, how about we just ask our wives if we're good at that?
Yeah, but if your wife is like mine, she's going to say, yeah, right, I'm going there. I can't wait to get in a fight. Mm. It's like, what? That's when you know it's not safe to walk in the house and out of the house because she's scared of you. My wife is frightened of me.
Wow.
What? Why would she be frightened? I'm Mr. Wonderful. How can anybody be afraid of wonderful me? But she was.
Mm. Number two is opening his mind to his wife. So you're right. If you're like most men, you may think you're letting your wife into your heart by letting her into your thoughts. Mm. Can you say more?
Got to be emotional. I ask a guy, who do you think is more normally, emotionally functional? You or your wife? Oh, my wife. And he thinks he's indicted her. And I say, okay. Give me a percentage. Mm. How much more do you think she is normally, naturally, emotionally functional than you are? Oh, 100%. And he thinks he's really nailed down that indictment now. I said, okay. Would she be more emotionally functional than the inventor of emotions, Jesus and God? And he says, no. Okay. Would Jesus be 100% emotionally functional? Absolutely. Okay. So if your wife is 100% emotionally functional, Jesus is 100% emotionally functional. Have we just discovered an area in which you are 100% deficient at portraying Christ?
Oh, my goodness.
I never thought of it like that. I said, oh, that's why we're in trouble all the time.
Yeah.
But if she's very emotional, and I'm going to live with my wife in an understanding way, a command from God, I've got to become emotionally functional. So how do I do that? Well, first of all, I got to start taking note of the things. You cannot live a day in life without emotional events taking place. And we don't even pay attention to them. Well, we don't want to. We've watched the women get emotional. It's like, yeah, I can't wait to go there because we're not interested. And yet Christ would be fully, and if you read the Bible, There's tons of emotions that God and Jesus experienced, and I never even noticed them before.
Right. Well, and that leads us to number 3, and that's being sensitive. You said a woman loves a man that has tear ducts that actually work.
Yeah. And in fact, last week when you were sharing about your wife going and getting in bed and getting almost in the fetal position and crying, it made me cry because it's like, wow, there's so much emotions there, and we don't know it. We're not interested necessarily in knowing it, and yet we must. If we're going to be like Christ, we have to be emotionally functional. And she has to know, for example, if we ask for forgiveness, a guy might say to his wife, all right, I'm sorry, would you forgive me?
Right.
Now, it's not quite repentant. But he has enacted the first half of the Christian formula, so what's she got to do? Yeah, I forgive you.
Mm-hmm.
Has it happened? No, it hasn't.
Right.
Why? Because he hasn't expressed to her his understanding of the emotions she experienced. So I'm thinking of a time Nancy and I had been gone for about a week, and we came home, and we were in the kitchen, and I was helping her fix dinner, and I heard something on the news that I had to get. So I left her, and I walked in the front room, and I came back. As I walked in the room, her posture said to me she was not feeling good. And I said, I blew it, didn't I? She says, yeah, how? I said, I made you feel like I didn't care about you. I made you feel like TV was more important than you, that news was more important than you, neglected, unimportant, disregarded, disrespected, dishonored. Now she knows I know how she felt, and she knows that I understand what I did to her. And so when I say, could you forgive me? Because you don't deserve that. Jesus wouldn't have done that to you, and yet I did. And so if he wouldn't do it, I shouldn't do it. Could you forgive me? And she says, absolutely. And it's like, wow. You will hear her, if you come to our seminar, you will hear Nancy say, there are no unresolved conflicts between us. And that's even going back years and years and years ago. We've been married for 57 years.
Wow.
She will go back. She can go back 57 years, and even those have been resolved.
My guest today is Ken Nair. He is the author of Discovering the Mind of a Woman, the founder of Christ Quest Ministries, and you can visit him at ChristQuestMinistries.com. Take a look at that seminar coming up here in Phoenix. It's in September, and then also learn about the discipleship program that Ken also has here in Phoenix. When we return, we're going to continue our conversation on the 6 desirable qualities of a man, and you're listening to The Dustin Daniels Show.
Want a quick and timeless parenting tip? Let your kids get bored.
This is Tim Kimmel, and here's my daughter, Karis Kimmel-Murray, with a Family Matters Minute.
Boredom is something we all avoid as though it's a deadly plague. I promise you, there have been exactly 0 documented cases of anyone dying from boredom. Sure, working hard is a virtue, and also we want our kids to have experiences that feed their brains, bodies, and souls. But if we constantly protect them from boredom, we steal one of the most powerful catalysts of their God-given creativity and resourcefulness. What's more, we need to let our kids slow down enough to get bored. They need to learn not to fear boredom. It's one of the best things we can do to prepare our kids to fight anxiety in a frantic world that worships the false god of busyness. Often, it's in the lull we've labeled boredom that we feel God's presence, hear His voice, and recognize His quiet grace.
Learn more about grace-based parenting at FamilyMatters.net.
You are listening to God, Sex, and Current Events. I'm your host, Dustin Daniels. My guest today is Ken Nair, author of Discovering the Mind of a Woman. He's the founder of Christ Quest Ministries. And once again, you can learn more about Ken at ChristQuestMinistries.com. Last week, we talked about the 4 male prejudices about women. And if you did not hear that show, let me encourage you to visit the website at DustinDanielsRadio.com. Listen to that, because that show leads into this one. How do we really become men of integrity? How do we become more Christ like. That's what we're talking about today. And we're going over the 6 desirable qualities in a man. And we've talked about walking in and out of the house without causing damage, opening our minds to our wives, and then being sensitive. And then, Ken, we're going to talk about your last one. 4 and 5 is being thoughtful enough to remember things that are important to her, creative doing things with her. Number 5, doing things with her and being inclusive and exclusive there. But I really want to hone in on number 6, and that is that the husband really believes that they are one, that we really are one flesh. And you're right in your book, I'm convinced that the concepts of oneness involves these principles, that 2 halves are fused together, making one, and that they are unable to properly function separately. And each requires the other for success. Can you say more?
Yeah. When God made us one, he meant one. I ask a guy because his wife feels like they really aren't one. And she says, I don't know what our financial picture is. He has friends I don't know about, etc. So I say to him, how many decisions do you make without letting you know of the decisions you've made? And he says, none. I said, okay, since you and your wife are one, then she is you. How many decisions do you make without letting you know of the decisions you've made? And we don't think like that.
No, we don't.
But if I'm supposed to be one with my wife, that means that she is aware. And I have to determine, if I'm saying, okay, I need to be Christ-like to my wife, she's the one that gets to determine whether I'm like Christ or not to her. Because there's only one person in the entire world that God requires I lay my life down for, and that's my wife, Nancy. That nobody else in the world do I have to lay down my life for. And like I mentioned last week, I was at a women's Bible college, and a woman says, well, that applies to women too. I'm like, no, show me where. He said, well, husbands lay down your life for your wife. I said, God knows the difference between men and women, right, and husbands and wives. And it does not say wives.
Yeah.
But they have been taught that that's true. I was at a wedding here a while back, and the pastor said to the husband, now you realize that God requires that you lay down your life for your wife. And he said, yes, sir. And he looked at the wife and he said, Scripture requires that of you too. I wanted to scream out, show me where it says that.
Might have killed the moment, but you're absolutely right. Yeah. So as we talk about a lot about sex and pornography and sexual issues and addictions on this program, and this idea of becoming one, two halves fused together. You write that including wives in the decision-making process so improves their sense of security that it also it's reflected in all aspects of intimacy. Can you say more?
A lot of women have said to me, he has lied to me, he has kept this a secret. And I say, why do you suppose he did that? And so he knows it's wrong. The problem is, though, he doesn't have a sense of the damage it will cause. Because I guess they say it's a private sin. Well, it's not. It affects the whole family because light and darkness cannot dwell together. Christ and our sin nature cannot dwell together. One of them is going to be in leadership. If I'm letting my sin nature be in leadership, if I know what that is, then Christ is not going to be the major influence. And the more emotionally functional I become, the more I will sense the damage this will cause my wife. And I don't want to run that risk of causing that damage because I don't want to be... See, I think I'm going to have to answer for that. When we get to heaven, here's an example I think of. I'm standing before God. And as I'm standing before God, have you ever seen a person who's been in a fire? Their skin actually melts.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I'm standing there before God, and this person comes walking up next to me and is severely burnt. And I'm looking at this and at this person, and God says, you know who that is? I said, no. He said, that's your wife's spirit. you have severely damaged her.
Wow.
You are going to have to give an answer for that. Because as her spiritual leader, it's my job to care for her spirit. I am her spirit's caretaker. Do I even know what that means? If I don't know what it means, I'm not threatened severely because I'm not hurting her, but I am. I'm causing damage. If light and darkness cannot exist together, then when I am indulging myself, I'm not going to be caring for her like Christ would, because I can't do it.
And isn't it amazing if we do not have our spirit speak to her spirit, then how can we truly become intimate as husband and wife, which glorifies God in many, many ways that we can't even conceive of?
Yep.
What is the wife's response to that? If we're not caring for our wives emotionally, like you're talking about, and then we want to become intimate, we demand sex, what does that look like?
Well, I'm looking at it like this. To men, sexual intimacy is paralleled in women with emotional sensitivity.
Mm-hmm.
So we want them to meet our mechanical, physical needs while we're not at all even aware of or addressing their emotional needs. And so if we're not addressing their emotional needs, it's like Nancy said to me, I've been mean to her, I've been sharp, harsh, derogatory, whatever, for all the time. And so now here we are, and she's saying he wants me to meet his intimate needs. He's not meeting my intimate needs. And so I'm shutting her down myself.
That's very interesting. If we are not meeting her intimate needs, and then we are demanding our wives to meet ours physically.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, let me give you a verse that Christians use often to get her to comply.
Sure.
It says, wives, your body is not yours. It's your husband's.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't deny him. And we're using that to force women to be sexually involved with their husbands. However, get this. The rest of the verse says, husbands, your body does not belong to you. It belongs to her. So if I'm going to use that verse to say you can't deny me, then she can say, okay, I don't deny you. But on the other hand, I'm saying your body belongs to me. You can't use it. Checkmate.
Wow.
If that verse is to be used in that sense, and it wasn't. But we use all kinds we twist Scripture to get our way. It's like the verse that says, let those who steal no more, rather to work with their hands. You know, they didn't have commas in the Bible. So how about if it said, let those who steal no more to work with their hands?
Yeah.
We can twist it.
Wow. Well, Ken, it has been a joy to speak to you over the last couple of weeks here. Thank you so much for your ministry. Thank you so much for this amazing book. Once again, the book is called Discovering the Mind of a Woman. And if you didn't hear the first show, let me encourage you to listen to the first intro, and you'll see how this affected me and a conversation that I had with Amy when I first started reading the book. You can visit ChristQuestMinistries.com to learn more about Ken's ministry. Ken and Nancy and what they're getting ready to do coming up in September with the conference. And you can order their materials on the website as well. Well, you can follow me on Twitter. You can rate the show on iTunes if you're an iTunes person. And you can email me your questions. Would love to answer your questions on the air. Now, we've been doing a lot of talking over the last 2 weeks. And 1 Corinthians 4:20 says the kingdom of God isn't just a lot of talk. It's living. And it's living in God's power. Amen. And the power that is in the very name and the shed blood of Jesus Christ. I love you. See you next week.
The Dustin Daniels Radio Show is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information with regard to the subject matter covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the host nor the station is engaged in rendering counseling advice for your personal situation. If you need further help, we encourage you to seek the services of a Christ-based counseling professional. For more information on the radio show, visit DustinDanielsRadio.com.